cactus and succulent growers, it's Lynn, and in today's video this is going to be a start of a monthly Q&A question and answers video that I'm going to be doing every month with any questions that you have on your cacti and succulents. And this was a video suggestion from my wonderful subscriber here called Brit, Britta's Hobbies here on YouTube. So hi Brit, and she said, could you do a question and answers video? And I said, that's a brilliant idea, and I've started it obviously from this month July, and then I'm going to be doing it every month. So if you have any queries with your cacti and succulents, I'll do my very best to help you in the question and answers video. And because Brit was the one who suggested this, I'm going to be answering Brit's questions first. So here we go. Now Brit's first question is, when would you start fertilizing epiphylum cuttings? Mine were planted in late April this year. Some have nice growth, and I can see roots coming out of the holes in the pot. Would you fertilise them at all this year? A couple out of the 9 have no growth yet, and those I would of course not fertilise. Now these are some of my small epiphyllums. Some of them have been cuttings, and some I've grown from seed. And if the roots are coming through the pot, as in this case with you Brit, I would definitely recommend feeding. You can give them a bit of fertiliser from the spring until sort of the autumn time, with every 4th watering you give them. And if the cuttings are growing quite large, you can even give them a week's strength tomato feed, because that does help encourage blooming. But usually cactus cuttings, especially epiphyllum cuttings, won't bloom for the first couple of years or so, because they are establishing a good root system. But you can definitely give them a bit of a feed. Tomato feed does work great as well, or we can use the more conventional cactus and succulent fertiliser. So once every 4th watering, from the spring right up until the end of the summer into the early autumn, but no feeding at all during the winter time. Now the second question Brit wants to know is, when would you start fertilising small cactus pups? Any at all the first year? I'm specifically thinking of 3 Echinopsis pups. One is 4 centimetre tall, the smallest is the size of a pea. And one is in between, but also thinking of some other unrooted pups that I've bought online. Now these are some of my little Echinopsis pups here, all different types. And I actually, if they've got roots and you've potted them up, and you've recently potted them up and they have got roots, I would probably, there's enough nutrients in the soil already, so you don't need to really worry about fertilising for the first few months anyway. But if they've been in the pot for a while and they are fully rooted, I'd recommend using a little bit of feed just to help to sort of get them into good growth. So again, I'd recommend a little bit of cactus and succulent fertiliser with every 4th watering you give to them from sort of spring up until the late summer. Now if they haven't got roots at all and you've potted them up, I wouldn't recommend feeding them until they have established themselves, even if they are big cactus pups. For example, some of these we just pot up, and that's because they're going to be sending a lot of energy to the root system. If you fertilise them and they're still trying to build their root system, they cannot build such a strong root system. I personally would pot up cactus pups like this, leave them for a good few months. If I do it in the winter, I'd leave them anyway until the spring, just use normal water, just so they can start to build the roots. And there's also enough nutrients in the soil already to help to set them off. But once they've been potted up for a good few months, you can give them a little bit of feed, a little bit, perhaps once every 4th watering you give them. Any cactus pups that don't have roots and you just pot them up, don't feed them at all until they have obviously got a good root system, which can take many months, even sometimes into the following year. And then once they've got a good bit of growth on them and they're fully rooted, then you can give a little bit of fertiliser, as I say, with every 4th watering. Now the third question, and this is actually a very interesting one. This is, Brit wants to know, when there has been a flower from an areol, can there then be new flowers or stems from the same areol? Now these are some of my gymnocalciums that have been blooming lovely and are blooming lovely at the moment, and as you can see, when the bloom goes, it sort of dies off, and often I find new buds starting to appear again from a different areol. And I have to say, this is a very good question, Brit, because I can only talk from my own experience. Personally, myself, when my cacti have flowered, I never see the same flower buds start to form on exactly the same areole. For example, there's a little bud coming up on this one, and it has previously been flowering, but it was from the other areole, and then another bud comes up. Even the following year, I always find it on a different areole. The same with any new growth as well. But however, this is only my experience. Maybe somebody might know, can correct me and say, well, I notice flower buds always coming up on the same areole on mine. I've never experienced it, but do let me know if you have. So Britt, I can't answer that 100%, only that personally my experience, I always notice it's another areole. Even with this gymnoclisium as well, like the last year it was blooming on that one, and then the new growth comes in the middle and this is from that one. But correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and I love to hear. I'm not an absolute expert. I've been growing cacti succulents for a very, very long time, and I only ever share my experience with growing them. There's lots of questions I still have unanswered myself, so I always learn from everybody else. So do let me know, have you experienced new flowers coming on exactly the same areole as last time? With me, as I say, it's always a different one. And then Britt's fourth question, the last question, it is there a genus of cactus that produces big and beautiful blooms but lasts more than 1 or 2 days? And those of you who know cactus blooms, usually the most beautiful, big and large, stunning blooms don't last long. For example, echinopsis flowers and epiphylum and queen of the night, they usually last 1 day, 1 night or a few hours, usually a day or 2 at the most. However, from the cacti I grow, there are some that do last a good few days, that don't have massive blooms but do have big, I think they're quite big and beautiful blooms, and that's the Echinocereus group. And this is my Echinocereus gentry. We have two of these growing seed pods, and they have recently been flowering. In fact, I did a video at the time, I did a little shorts video as well, so do check it out on my my videos and my shorts. Beautiful, big, shocking pink blooms with a lovely shocking green stigma, beautiful blooms, and they actually last about almost a week. Like their blooms close up and then they open up again, usually towards the evening, but they last into the good part of the day as well before they close back, and do last a good at least 4 to 5 days. So definitely Echinocereus would be my recommendations. Also Perodia flowers as well. These are my Perodia magnificas, and no signs of buds yet this year, but these sometimes bloom for me in the August time, so I'm hoping these will still come into bloom. But these don't have huge flowers, but they do last for about 3 to 4 days, and they're always beautiful and golden, very stunning. And Astrophytum as well, you may get a couple of days out of them. My Astrophytum ornatum has a lovely big yellow bloom, and usually with a lovely red throat inside, and you usually get 2, sometimes 3 days out of them. So they're definitely the ones I can recommend. Now the next question is from a subscriber called Merit Lark, and Merit Lark wants to know, the question is, I live in the Sonoran Desert and have lots of gorgeous cacti in the ground. Oh, I'm so jealous. But I'm worried about putting or keeping some in pots. Will they burn up quick in pots here? And well, the answer to that is, if you're able obviously to grow them in the ground, that's definitely the best way. But you can still have them in pots also. It's best to have them potted up in clay pots, because clay pots are more breathable for the roots in hot temperatures. Plastic pots have a habit of they can get very hot, and I experienced this last year when we had our heat waves. A lot of the cacti was boiling up in the pots. Don't normally have to worry about it here in Ireland in the summer. So clay pots are definitely more breathable if you're going to have them out in clay pots. Problem with clay pots is they do need a lot more regular watering, especially if you're in a warm and arid climate. So they're going to need a lot more regular watering. Water every time that the soil has dried out. And if you're able to water them of an evening time when it does get a bit cooler, obviously if you live in a warm, hot climate, it may not get that cooler of an evening, but evening is always better when the sun has gone down. So yes, you can grow them in pots, but just make sure you keep them ideally in clay pots, regularly watered, water of an evening. And if you can grow them in the ground, lucky you, I would do that. Now the next question is by subscriber Thea James. And the question is, I would love to know the story of how you got your first cactus or succulent and how your obsession began. Well, this is going to be a very exciting one. Now, I have made a video where I talk about what got me into cacti and succulents for the very first time. And for a lot more information, I will link that video up above, and I'll also link it down below in the video description. But just running over it quickly, what started off my obsession? Well, I'm 52 now, and I was 12 years old when I got hooked, excuse the pun, on growing cactus. And what did it for me is my older brother Mike, who is 5 years older than me. He brought some cacti and succulents home from a garden centre called B&Q, and I'd never seen anything so amazing in my life. Even as a child, I loved to grow things. I used to grow little things. My auntie Leah was mad on growing plants. She had a lovely conservatory. I think that's what got me obsessed with growing, but not cacti and succulents. But when I saw them, I was just amazed, and I actually begged my brother to have them, and he ended up giving them to me. And I still have them in my collection today, as I show you in that video, and so do check it out. But very quickly, I'll just show you here. This is one of my Haworthias that was originally my brother's, and I've had this since I was 12 years old. Absolutely beautiful plant, and it was actually just one little head, and it has just grown into a mound over the years, and it would even be bigger than that because I often have to separate it and give pieces away. But that's one of the originals. Also as well here, the Opuntia. This is very, very old. This is an Opuntia rafida micro daisies, the mini version, and this was also one I had since I was 12 years old that I got from my brother. And it was just a little small piece at the time, and it has just grown so much. Very difficult plant to grow, even though I've grown it for many, 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 many years. Well, put it like that, 40 years I've grown this, and I still have it to this day. But it's one of them ones that's always sort of dying back, as you can see here. I'm always having to keep repropagating it. It's not an easy one to propagate, and it's not one you see very often, but it's a very special one to me because it's one of my very oldest that I've had in my collection. And also I'm going to have to take you into the other polytunnel as well to show you the other one. I'm just going to take you out here for a little walk, guys, into my little white greenhouse, because I've got some of my originals growing in here. Now this is one that at the very back there, can't get any closer, you can see. It's probably about 5 feet high, and it's a Plasker cheapie, and it is one that I've obviously had since I was 12, one I got from my brother as well, and it has grown amazing over the years, so that's very, very special. And this here, this actual pot, this is Chamaerosaurus sylvestri, and this is actually a load of cuttings that I had to repropagate from the very original plant that I got when I was 12 from my brother as well. And it did grow into a huge mound of gorgeous peanuts, as they call them, but it came down with a bad case of mealybug a few years ago, and I had to completely pull it apart and repropagate it. But this is the original plant, sorry, this is the cuttings from the original plant here. So I've still got the genetics, and it's still going, as you can see. These ones are all other different types of Chamaerosaurus that I had got from other growers over the years, but this is the propagation from the original plant. So Thea, that's the plants I got from when I was 12 years old. And I say it was my brother, my big older brother, that got me hooked on growing cacti and succulents, because I became absolutely obsessed with them after that. And every time I went to the garden centre and I had some pocket money, as they call it when you're young and you're growing up, your parents give you a bit of pocket money, I would treat myself to a new cactus or new succulent. And I soon filled my bedroom window with plants. And then my poor mother and father, I then started on the rest of the house, and I said, can I put this in this window and this one in that window and that window? And that's how it got the obsession. When I was in my early 20s, I moved out and got my own little place, and I had a little greenhouse out the back, and only a little small greenhouse, packed it with plants, and over the years, obviously I've moved house multiple times and moved greenhouses. Then I came to Ireland over, it was back in 2006 and I had greenhouses in the back garden, mostly plastic greenhouses. And then I started my YouTube channel back in 2012, and I was lucky enough at the time to have a conservatory in the house I used to rent, and I was able to start my channel up. Moved multiple times since because I rent, and had different greenhouses, and now have all of the majority of my collection here in 2023 in this polytunnel here, big green polytunnel. Me and Hans are hoping to replace this polytunnel this year, hopefully the September time, with a white or a clear one, either a greenhouse or a polytunnel. So that's going to be very exciting. And I also have the one out here as well, this other the little white greenhouse also. So that's me in 2023. And that's how my passion for growing cacti and succulents started, as a little 12-year-old, obsessed when my brother brought them home from the garden centre. Now the next question is from my wonderful friend Elder at Flowers Zone Forever. So hi Elder, and Elder wants to know, what is your favourite cactus? Now that is actually a very hard question, because I'm just addicted to all of them, and I'm often being asked, what is your favourite? If you can only choose one, and you can only choose one, and I change every week, or maybe it's that, or could it be that? If I had to just choose my ultimate favourites, there would have to be Lophophora and Trichocereus, and that's because I just love how wacky and wonderful these cacti are. These are my Lophophoras, and they might not look the most prettiest of cacti to look at. You either sort of love them or you hate them, but I love them because they look weird, and they are completely spineless as well. They just have little tufts where the areoles are instead of spines, and they produce gorgeous little pink flowers as well. They're just lovely. I love them, and I just love the wackiness and how they look. They just have a real appeal to me, but it is sort of hard to choose the exact one. But Trichocereus as well. I'm just going to show you the Trichocereus. Here I'm in the little white greenhouse here, and Trichocereus are all these sort of ones here, and they're very tall growing plants, and that's the only disadvantage, because it's very difficult for space because obviously they grow tall. But the good thing is about Trichocereus, you can cut them back regularly, and I've had to do that many times over the years. They just sort of spring up and grow again, as you can see there, and they branch out. Amazing. Got some coming into bud, and the flowers on them are absolutely stunning when they flower. Huge, big, plate-shaped flowers, often heavily scented, very gorgeous. But again, I just love how wacky these are. These are my Scopolycolas, and many different types. And I've got to be honest, if I had the space, I would have a greenhouse, very tall one, where I could just house all of my Trichocereus in. They are just awesome cacti. Many different types as well in the genus. Now the next question is by Dave Scott, and Dave wants to know, do you have any crassula plants other than jades? Well, I have quite a lot of crassula in my collection. Here's some of our succulents here, and we have different types of crassulas, all different varieties here. A lot of jade plants as well, but also many different types of crassulas. And I have done a complete video on our jade plant crassula collection, so do go over and watch that video. I know that I sent the link to Dave, and Dave did watch it, but guys, if you want to know our complete crassula collection, do watch that video. Links to that will be up above and down below in the video description. Now the next question is from Tony, and Tony wants to know, do you get problems with slugs and snails? Well, yes, I do. And how I combat that is, I know you might think I'm crazy, guys, but I really don't like to kill slugs and snails. And I actually do go out, not every night, but at least 2 or 3 times a week with a torch when it gets dark. Here in the summer now, it's usually about 11 o'clock, and I do check. I often see slugs come out and going onto the trays, and I just pick them out, put them into a bucket, and then just put them out over into the field opposite. But with the slugs are more of a pest, I find, with smaller cacti. And what I've used that I found that's been very effective for me, and I'll just go and take you again into the white greenhouse here, because I can show you an example. With my smaller seedlings and things like that, such as these Trichocereus cacti, I actually put tape, and it's copper wire tape. I put it around the pots. Doesn't look the most attractive, but it works. I've not had any problems with slugs since on the seedlings. Now, if I could get tons of it, you know, copper wire tape, it's not expensive, but when you have a lot of plants such as I do, it would take not only so much time to go around with all the tape and put them on, but also cost a fortune to get all the tape. So it's not practical to use if you have a large collection. But on small seedlings where I find it's a problem with slugs, I mean, there's a piece that was taken out last year, and it's sent another pup out there, which is great. It's recovered. They're great to use on small pots and seedlings, so that it does definitely keeps them away. They've not been on these since I put the copper wire on. And copper wire you can get from a lot of garden centres, even the pound shops, dollar shops. They'll often have them for £1 or £2, and it works really well at keeping slugs away. So my methods, I just pick any off I can and use the copper wire tape on any very delicate plants and young seedlings or very special young plants. And other than that, it's just an annoyance. I sort of put up with. Most cacti can recover from slug and snail damage. There can be disfiguring, but the actual slime that slugs and snails give off, although it's not nice, it doesn't give a virus or anything like that to your cactus or succulent, like a lot of pests. Mealybug, for example, spread a lot of viruses and plants can go yellow. Slugs, other than just being a pest and taking chunks out your plants, they don't spread viruses. So I just prefer to pick off and use the copper wire tape. And I mentioned as well, I don't want to say about all these videos, guys, but I'll link a video down below as well on how I use copper wire to prevent slugs. And if you want to know more about that, do check that video out. As I say, it'll be down below in the video description. Now the next question is by Janella. And Janella wants to know, is it normal for cacti to have dry root rot after overwintering them? Now, obviously, when you overwinter cacti, I'm always saying keep them dry and unwatered over the winter rest period, because they need that to have a rest. If you water cacti during the winter, or the majority of cacti, they will often rot. And it also depends on where you've got them as well. If you've got them in a heated living room in the winter, they may need a bit of water. Otherwise, they can suffer from dry root rot. And then when you go to water them again, they'll often rot. So it's just finding the balance. And there's also certain types of cacti as well that do still need to be watered throughout the winter time. And I'll show you some example here. This is an Ulbomania, and this one does not like to be kept bone dry all over the winter. This one needs winter warmth, so it's one I bring in to overwinter in my grow room, and I do have to give it a bit of water every month all through the winter time to stop it from dying back. Otherwise it will suffer from root dieback, and it's a more tropical cactus. So it's really important you know what type of cactus that you have. I often experience I have experienced dry root rot where I've had to completely reroot cacti after the winter, mostly with cacti such as Gymnocalcium and sometimes my Myrabusias as well. These are sort of a lot of them, my Myrabutia. And when I don't experience it so much now, they're in the polytunnel for the winter, but when I had them indoors in a warm room and years ago, I used to find when I started them back up to water them again, they wouldn't take up water, and I'd take them out the pots and I'd find the roots were completely dry and just died back, and then I had to cut off the old dead roots and treat it as a cutting and reroot, and then you often won't find it will come into flower to the following year. So what I recommend in that case, is it normal? Well, it shouldn't really be normal, but it can happen a lot with certain types of cacti if they've been kept drier than ideal over the winter. And as I say, the dilemma is if you water them during the winter, you find they'll die back as well. So you know they'll rot. So in this case, I've had to, even some of these Gymnoclysum here, I've had many a good few years. There's times when they haven't took up water when I've started to water them in the spring, and after a couple of weeks or so, if they're not taking up water and they're looking shriveled, I will then take it out the pot. Any dead roots, I completely cut back any dead roots. Sometimes if it's very severe, I have to cut off the whole of the root system, treat it as a cutting, sprinkle with a bit of cinnamon powder, leave it for 48 hours ideally, and then pot up again and go very, very careful with the watering, treat as a cutting, and they'll reroot that season. So it can be a bit tricky. So yes, it does happen sometimes, and as I say, you just have to do the best you can when it comes to overwintering. Now the next question is by Iqbal Hussain. Have you experience on Hoya? And the answer to that is yes, I have quite a few Hoyas in my collection, in my grow room. I love Hoya plants as well, and they are beautiful bloomers. And I've made quite a few videos on this channel on my Hoya collection and also the type of Hoyas I grow. So do go and check them out. They'll all be in my videos with all the Hoyas, and I've also done say a few care videos as well. So yes, I have Hoyas, and they do very well in my grow room. The most popular one, and the one I really love, is the Hoya Kerry. And as I've done quite a few videos on my single leaf Hoya Kerry that has grown amazing over the years with lots of new growth as well. So do check out them videos. Now the next question is by Hypers Toss, and wants to know, how do I propagate a mammillaria that has etoliated? And etoliation is when a cactus plant has stretched out, usually from lack of light or even too much light too soon, and they're suddenly getting to very sunny and they're suddenly put on a lot of growth and they grow too fast. It can stretch out. There can be many reasons for that, but it's usually down to lack of light. Now what I'd recommend is if you want to propagate a stretched out mammillaria, is first of all I wouldn't recommend propagating the stretched part. You want to cut back any etoliated stretched out growth. So I would recommend first removing the thin part. And for example now, luckily I don't have any etoliated plants to show you, but this is a mammillaria here, and that's sort of normal growth. But if it was lack of light, it would then grow very thin and spindly. And you know, if you was to cut that part off and try and propagate the thin etoliate, it's not going to be healthy, and all the new growth is then going to be larger and wider. So I would cut off the thin growth, let the top part callus over, you can sprinkle with a bit of cinnamon powder which acts as a fungicide, and then within a few months or a year or two you will start to get pups growing around the base of where it's being cut. And mammillaria are quite good at producing pups. If you cut them, they will pup out around the areoles from the top. Once then pups are large enough, you can then remove them and pot them up as little individuals. And to show you here as well, this is how a lot of the mammillaria grows. If it was growing sort of all stretched up there, I would remove it. So that's what and also you want to fix the problem, because if you just cut off the spindly thin part and then put it back to where you had it, it's going to carry on the new growth, and even the pups are going to go stretched. So you want to make sure that you correct the problem, and as I mentioned, it's usually down to lack of light. So cacti, mammillaria plants, they do need a lot of direct sunshine, so a nice sunny position, and that will stop your cactus from growing stretched. And I have made a video on how to propagate cactus pups, and this is for, I think I show an example of an Echinopsis cactus in that video, but it will also work for other types of clumping cacti that you want to separate the pups from as well. So do watch that video. I'll link that up above and down below in the video description. But don't propagate the stretched out part, because it's just not going to be healthy. Now the last question is from Flower Friends 66, And the question is, I would like to know, how often do you repot your big and thick cactus plants? Well, not as much as I should, but I would probably repot the large ones, and I'll just show you an example here. This one is a very desperate to be repotted, very tall Trichocereus Pacanoid Scopolycola, coming into double bud. And I should really repot that at least every couple of years, but down to time and lack of space and all these other excuses, I don't repot it enough. Same as this one here. This is a Pachycereus pringlei, a very sort of tall one as well, over 5 feet high. And how often would I repot them? I would say about every 5 years. What I tend to do is, because of space issues, obviously, I find if I repot very tall cacti, they will put on a huge growth spurt quite suddenly in one growing season. So because I want to keep down on the space a little bit, I would tend to keep them a little bit, not as potted up as that, repot them as much as I should, but I do fertilize them regularly and make sure that they are all fed, so they're getting nourishment. And you can usually tell when a cactus plant really needs to be repotted. It starts to go yellow even when you are feeding it and the roots are coming through the pot, and it's just desperate to be potted on. So I repot a lot of my big ones roughly about every 5 years. I've got to do this one this year. This is my big golden bowel. Clearly needs repotting because it's hanging over the side, so that's going to be repotted this season anyway. So that's the answer to that one. I have made a video on how to know when you should repot a cactus, and I explain the many reasons in there when you should do it. So unfortunately I don't repot as much as I should, but I do try and keep on top of the repotting as much as I can. I like to think I repot every single cactus I have at least once every 5 years. So there we go, that's all the questions answered for this month's question and answers. And if you have any questions you would like to know answers to with your cacti succulents, I'll do my best to help for the August Q&A video, so do let me know in the comments down below. And also thank you Brit at Britta's Hobbies for the video suggestion. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you haven't done already, don't forget to subscribe. Do click the notification bell so you'll be notified when I upload new videos. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Desert Plants of Avalon. And do check out my website for many blogs and growing tips on there as well, desertplantsofAvalon.com. I want to wish you all a fantastic cactus and succulent powered day.